So, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us today is Olivier Crête from Collabora. Well, not only an old friend of the open source community, but one of the few companies who actually works with and for open source. So, I'm super excited to have you joining us today, Olivier.
I'm really excited to join too.
Well, as I was saying, Collabora has a very interesting position in the market. So, maybe you could start by introducing yourself and your company and letting us know what you do.
So I've been an open source developer for over 20 years now, starting with contributing to an ICQ client in the late
Oh,
90s. So yeah, that doesn't make me any younger. And after I graduated, a friend of mine had started a company to do chat, video calls. That was back when Nokia was doing trying to make a Linux-based phone. And when I graduated, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna work for a startup. I need to work for a real company. You're a guy in a garage. But a year and a half later, he came back, and I was like, okay, now I think the real companies are not that much fun. I'll go work for a startup, and that was 16 years ago now, I think. And we're so what do we do at Collabora? We're an open source consultant, so we help people who build products using open source software. Most of our customers build some kind of platform or product using open source software, and we help them interact with our community. All of our developers, and we're over 100 developers right now worldwide, are open source developers themselves, contributing as part of the community to the various projects that we work on.
So what's the first of all, I know what the main project you work on is, but I'm curious about hearing it for you. So what's the main project you work on in the it's a very well known package actually.
Yeah, so Collabora as a whole, we work on many things, but my team, which is a multimedia team, works mostly on GStreamer. That's
Woo!
kind of our main main project. But as Collabora as a whole, we work across the entire stack. We have a big Linux kernel team, Mesa, GPU drivers, all of the rest of the stack, a lot of Debian work also. But the work I care most about is the GStreamer work. And this is where actually I started at Collabora when I joined and to do video calls, and we were doing that with GStreamer. So on my day one, I was told, "Well, you have to learn GStreamer." I had vaguely heard of it before. Now I'm one of the core developers.
So for the few people that don't know what GStreamer is, can you give us a quick introduction just to set the stage?
Yes, GStreamer is it's a multimedia framework. So it's a graph-based library to build media streaming graphs. It can do audio, it can do video, it can do other kinds of media, and you have elements and you put them in a arbitrary graph, and then you can do any kind of multimedia application, from video editing to video playback to streaming to complex video calls, all the way to we have a pretty uh, complete WebRTC stack now.
Nice. WebRTC too? I'll need to look it up. So and you manage and you help manage a very large open source project. So, how many contributors do you have, and what's the typical workflow for someone wanting to contribute?
So the GStreamer project is actually not as big as it looks like. So
Oh,
there's maybe 10, 15 core developers who have commit access, who commit semi-regularly. But we're based on GitLab now, so it's really easy to contribute. All you have to do is create an account on the free desktop GitLab and make a merge request. We have about 200 or 300 contributors per release. Most of these people contribute one or just two merge requests. So often it's something small. You know, people build an application, one thing doesn't work, they fix it. Uh, because it's pretty common for something as big as GStreamer that when you try to make something that no one else has made before, you're gonna either find a missing feature or hit some kind of bug. And we're always welcoming contribution.
well, doesn't sound like 300 contributors per release are a small number. To be fair, I mean it is a huge number for not even today's number. Like in general, knowing that not everybody the contributors will actually make it to the release, etc. So you need far few more to get to 300. It's impressive actually. It is very impressive. And how do you manage the community? Is there are the mailing lists still used to do things?
So
What
we have a
what
mailing list, and we mostly use it for user support. Most
Mhm.
of the community actually happens on our RC channel. So we have an RC channel which is now on Libera, I believe. And this is what we actually use to talk to the other members of the community. Uh, I said Libera, I mean OFTC, because we used to be on the
Pre-node.
Freenode that closed. Uh, so we mostly talk there. We meet twice a year at the conference and the Hackfest, the core developers, but everyone's welcome. That's also announced on the mailing list. But most of the actual technical work actually happens on GitLab. So we look at the merge requests, we fix them, whatever is needed there.
Nice. There's yeah, well, IRC. Wow. That's another thing that's not very well, it's still very much used to be fair. IRC is still out there, but it's not something you hear every day, right? Nowadays cool kids are using all the Slacks and the
Yeah, yeah,
even mailing lists.
yeah. GStreamer has been going on for 20 years, so we have some of our infrastructure. We were in CVS, we switched to Subversion, and then to Git, right? So we have a lot of this old
So that
infrastructure that has worked for us.
well, yeah, I mean anything that's keeps communication clear and open is always useful. So, question for you. I was looking at the Collabora website and I noticed a project I'll be honest, I've never heard about, but I want to learn a lot about, which is Pipewire. Are you involved with that? Do you know what that
Yes.
component is?
So it's I don't know if you know what Pulse Audio is. So it's
Oh, definitely, yeah.
so Pipewire is basically a replacement for Pulse Audio. It started
Hmm.
off by people in Red Hat being asked, can you make a Pulse Audio but for video so that you can share a webcam between multiple applications on the desktop,
Hmm.
and so that you could have containerized applications and security and all this stuff. And they hired Wim Taemans, who's the main architect of GStreamer, to work on that. And he started off and he started to write something GStreamer based, and he was like, maybe I can do something a little better. And he ended up writing a completely new multimedia framework solely dedicated to moving media streams between processes inside a system. So that's what Pipewire is for. It's a daemon that you can, with low latency, low overhead, move media streams between processes within the computer.
So it
Uh,
is a precursor to streaming audio over well, just streamer, whatever it is
yes,
that you're using for streaming. Cool.
yes.
So, what other interesting open source projects do you have going on at Collabora? You mentioned you have a large kernel team, and I think you do a lot of with one of the browsers, right?
We don't work so much on the browser anymore. We used to have a browser team. Nowadays, our competitor and friends at Igalia are really are the biggest contributor now to the browsers after the very big guys.
Oh, yeah. The and like LibreOffice, right? Is
Yes.
LibreOffice still out there? I guess so.
LibreOffice is still out there. It's alive and kicking, and we have a sister company called Collabora Productivity that's the
Hmm?
biggest contributor to the LibreOffice community. One of the big contributions that we've made is something called Collabora Online, which is a
Hmm?
LibreOffice version that runs in your browser, well, in the cloud, that you access through your
Wow.
browser. So you can have your own on-premise competitor to like Google Docs.
And
So
that is open source,
it's
or
all
is it
open
a
source. Yes,
so you can run it yourself?
yes, everything is open source. It's happening all on the LibreOffice main repos.
So you can run it yourself, or you can use your cloud if you'd prefer to have it hosted somewhere.
So Collabora itself doesn't do the hosting, but we have a number of partners who offer this as a service. Because Collabora Office itself is only the editing. You need something like Nextcloud to do the actual document hosting.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of not even a plugin, but it's a combination. Well, yeah,
Sure.
that's great. I mean, it's been a while since I've honestly I don't write up that much. I do a lot of writing, but it's really just the text. Then I have more capable and better people reviewing and making it into real materials. But I generally just use online tools. So having an online version that's really open source is great.
Yeah, I
So,
mostly use spreadsheets now as a part-time manager. So
spreadsheets. Wow, yeah, that's I don't use spreadsheets as much. Sometimes I get one very complicated pricing worksheet from sales, I have to go figure it out. But generally, it's not that that complicated. So, well, I was looking around and I see you also offer training. So that might interest a lot of people.
So we offer a GStreamer training that we've been giving for like over a decade now, even more.
Hmm.
That's really an introduction for people who want to work with GStreamer that we offer for groups of up to 12 engineers. So it's a hands-on training where people write a GStreamer plugins over 5 days. So it's for really for teams that want to build complex GStreamer-based applications.
What's the yeah? So that what is the usual mechanism? Like, how long is it the training? Do you give it at conferences? Is it done online? Because I do the Friswitch training. I've been done that for a long time. So I'm curious. I want to learn from from you.
So traditionally, we would do it on site, right? One of us would fly into and spend like 5 days in a room with the developers of the
Hmm.
customer, and uh, they would write code mostly, and we would be around helping them. And basically, they would be writing 3 plugins over that week and see all the different steps and understand all the mechanisms.
Hmm.
In the last couple years since the pandemic, we started doing it online using Zoom. Uh, so in that case, we realized that doing it 5 days in a row on Zoom, everyone goes crazy. So we've been spreading it out over 2 or 3 weeks and half days. Uh, so that's an option that's been quite popular. Although I still think it's more fun to fly in and meet people, but
Yeah, I pretty much like it. I pretty much like doing on-site training too. But you're right. Doing on-site training, you can do. We usually never do more than 2 days in a row because we're generally just doing intros. But even the 2 days are possible in person. Doing 8 hours 2 days in a row over Zoom will probably I don't know. I will die. It will
it's not
just
fun.
be. Plus, yeah, you lose your focus. I keep online training at less than 2 hours. So 2 hours is fine if you're doing a focus session where you're showing one thing well, but it's not easy to do. Well, maybe we
So
should.
yeah, when we do a little longer, it's mostly the people writing code and then sharing their screen, and then
Hmm,
I we use breakout rooms, and then I jump from one room to the next and see that all the people in each room are actually following and managing to write code.
nice. So well, oh, cool. There's an so I keep seeing so much cool stuff in your blog. Sorry that I keep jumping topics, but there's a I want to know everything about the optical end tracking thing. Is that
So
part of your streamer?
not at all. So that's part of another project that we've started, which is Monado, which
Okay,
is
yeah.
an OpenXR implementation. So OpenXR is the standard from Kronos, the same people that build OpenGL for extended reality VR, AR headsets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not for the GPU part, but everything else that you need, right? Such as the input, the hand tracking, the tracking of the head position, all these things. Uh, until OpenXR was created, you had different APIs, one from Steam, one from Microsoft, etc., one from Oculus. OpenXR has standardized that, a bit like OpenGL did for GPUs in previous decades. And Monado is the only open source implementation. And as part of that effort, we wrote a hand tracking system based on AI, machine learning, to try to generate a model on the ends and have this input.
Well, guys, go look it up because I was just watching. I watched a few seconds of the video. It's just incredible what you
Yes,
can
yes.
do. Well, I guess those are the numbers.
Yes, and it's AI, right? It's magic to me too. I don't know exactly how it works.
So, well, I assume you go to a lot of conferences. What's the last one you went to, and what would you talk about?
So I was at FOSDEM 2 weeks ago,
Woo!
3 weeks
I
ago.
love Fusdom.
Yes. So in our company, some people go to a lot of conferences, others don't. I go to as many as I can, and FOSDEM is my reason to go to Europe every year in February, and because the whole community is there. And I give a little presentation about the state of GStreamer, so something a bit, I would say, a bit generic, like what's happened in GStreamer in the last 2 years. Generally, me or one of the other community member, Tim, gives that every year at them, so that we tell a bit the rest of the open media community there. One of the interesting at FOSDEM is that it's not only GStreamer, right? There's like people from VLC, from
Yeah.
from MPV, from FFmpeg, from all of these other communities get to meet up in the same room and talk to each other, which often doesn't happen at more specialized conferences.
Plus the downstream people like us at Friswitch, Janus, and all the other video platforms using your stuff to get things actually working. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, which in fact leads me. So you mentioned GStreamer now as WebRTC support.
Yes.
How will you use that? I'm just curious.
So we have a plugin called WebRTC bin,
Hmm.
and basically what it does is it does the media side of WebRTC, but not the media, the network side, sorry, not the media side. So it's largely used in embedded systems where you might not want to use the libWebRTC stack. You
Oh,
might want to have something that's already GStreamer integrated. Uh, and we pretty now have pretty much all the features that you expect from WebRTC stack. The last release added the main missing feature, which was a bitrate adaptation. Uh,
mhm.
so we have basically everything that you expect, and it because it's GStreamer based, you can attach it to like hardware encoders that have GStreamer plugins on various embedded systems, which is what the bit that I'm more so interested in. But I know some people are doing like cloud-based solutions too, where the hardware encoding is might be less important.
Wow, yeah. The WebRTC on embedded is something that we never discuss enough. There's a lot of push there. You could do it other ways, but in the end, having WebRTC directly on the device is very often useful. So I think we're a good spot now. It took a while, but
And I'm seeing it coming to industries that are a bit more conservative, like security cameras. Now some of them have WebRTC because previously they had an RTSP server, and then they would stream to some cloud, and then they would have some service to do the conversion, and then streaming to your smartphone using WebRTC. And now we see some of the devices having WebRTC directly in the camera.
and all of that is more convenient than using, for example, SIP, which has its own set of problems when
Yeah,
you
I
want to
mean,
do streaming.
SIP is very complicated too. It's simple but not, right? As you probably know, way too much.
Yeah, I've told multiple people that SIP is the wrong way to go about doing a security camera, unless it's a very super complicated device that does other things. Like if you have speakers and a microphone, you want to do bi-directional stuff, you want to control things, then maybe. But if you're just playing video and getting the video from your camera, no, it's really a lot of work.
And one of the things that we have with GStreamer that we use the same RTP stack for RTSP, for SIP, for WebRTC. So we kind of share all the same code to do all of the more
Oh,
advanced
really?
RTP features. Yes. So things like retransmissions and forward error correction and all of this stuff. He uses the same code across all the different protocols.
Nice. Good. So the so I have the hardest question for you, which I always ask to people that technical people. I like what Olivier is doing, and I want to help. How do I get started?
So it's very simple. You go to gitlab.freedesktop.org/gstreamer. You clone the code. It's one big repo now. It's easy to build, and you start hacking and you submit merge requests.
What
Um,
studies did you do in the field, if any, just to
I,
get to
I did
frame people?
very classical software engineering at Poly.
Well, that is less classic than some people will say, right?
Yes, it's true. Like one of our partners here did political science. So
Well, that seems to be common. Our CTO has a physics degree too. So yeah, it's has to be has to do something with all those weird formulas and the difficult calculations that shapes you for. Yeah, I've did software engineering too. I come from a standard degree too, but it's not that. I mean, open source is full of interesting careers and people, so it's always great. So talking about open source, do you feel like the number of contributors or people who are interested has gone up or down in the last 5 years?
I think it's gone up a lot. There's a lot of more people, and in many ways, it's not the communities that I knew that I was part of, for the last
Hmm.
15 years are growing. It's other communities, things like the Kubernetes, like revolution,
Oh yeah.
right? that has become like KubeCon is now the biggest open source conference, right, in the world. Uh, Before that, it was FOSDEM. Right? There's this whole huge increase, I think, in open source users and developers around cloud. I mean, embedded is basically all open source now, right? Unless you're automotive. Almost everyone else has switched to Linux a long time ago. But the
Going,
the rest
yeah,
of the world as is catching up, I think.
that's good. Yeah, automotive. Well, automotive is going to always be different because, frankly, you need to have a car. To, in a sense, like you don't really need to have a car, but
Yes, but
there.
that said, Teslas are all running on Linux, and there's a lot of push now from everyone else to catch up because these proprietary operating systems are just not moving fast enough, right? So, and
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't know they run on Linux.
yeah, they run on Linux. They have an AMD CPU. They're much less weird than other automotive people.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Then I guess there's going to be some kind of open source move towards that too. It's
There is. I know that some major open source players are investing in automotive now, and are
yeah, open source cars are probably a bit far away because there's a lot to do. Like, it's easier to build an Arduino or Raspberry from components than to build a.
yes, yes. Although mostly right now it starts in the entertainment processor, which is a bit less critical. But there are pushes to move open source into the engine control unit, which are really the name for any processor that actually has to do something with driving. Especially with self-driving, you need a much more
Mm.
complex platform.
That would be super cool too. I expect that at some point that will meet regulations and be an issue. Like you cannot you couldn't really have a car driving around that's just a pull request you did on on a Sunday afternoon after after a couple of years. So
Yes, and a lot of these automotive uh, certifications are about processes, right? About documenting and following processes. So there's nothing really that prevents it from being open source.
oh, really? Yeah, well, you're right. It probably doesn't really change anything. For 100% right. I'm wondering then what's next. Like, are there any let's call them, are there any precedents, and like, is there any other field where something was hardware based and very industry based was made open source? Well, I guess Linux itself is. So
Yes, and this is always what I'm looking at. Like broadcast TV was very hardware based. Everything was FPGA based, and now a lot of it was, eaten by software. That maybe like 5 years ago. Uh, Interesting place is you see who are buying FPGAs, and you see, oh, these people are gonna become software based. But at the same time, you see things that were software going to specialized hardware on SoCs, right? Things like machine learning, for example, was really
yeah,
pure software, and
I'm
now people are building
expecting.
hardware for it. Image processing, right? There's pretty complex ISPs on cameras. And what we're seeing is that people now want open source software to control these hardware blocks. So instead of saying, "Oh, my, camera is a complete closed block," it just gives me frames. People say, "No, I want to actually control the process step by step, and I want the software there to be open source." So this is one of the areas that's slowly coming up.
What I'm wondering is if there's anything coming down the road, but it's gonna take a while. Like it's gonna be expensive to experiment on cars again. Going back to cars,
Yes,
it's
I think cars are very expensive if you're if you're a normal person, but the car industry is huge, right? There's a lot of suppliers, and a lot of people actually know a lot about this who actually want open source. So if you're like a community member, it's difficult, but if you're an automotive supplier, then it's already in.
yeah. We're
And a
probably
lot
going
of
to
it is
need some
small
level
parts,
of.
right?
Probably going
There's
to
a
need
company called
some. Oh,
Sorry,
comma?
Comma.ai, and they have
Yes,
a replacement software for some cars already.
really? That's cool. The that's That's interesting. And what do you need to run it? Like you run it in your computer, and then you need to go. So how does it get to the car? I guess that's the question.
So basically, cars they have something called a CAN bus, which is a hardware
Hmm.
network inside the car that controls the different parts. And basically, you plug into that. So you add another computer and you plug into the CAN bus, and that's what actually runs the software. So you can actually by connecting there, sending commands and change how it actually works, how the car works.
But you're allowed to do that. Like really.
It's your car, right? I mean, if you're selling the car, it's a whole different matter. But you can go with your wrench and remove the brakes in your car, right? It might not be road legal anymore. It's your
Oh
car;
wow.
you can do what you want.
Okay, yeah, that's my question. So it might end up being making the car not road legal. That was the discussion.
Maybe yes, but I understand Kamaya is actually still road legal. I'm don't quote me.
Yeah, I guess it really
Don't try this
depends
at
on.
home.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on what are you actually do to the car and what the.
Yeah, there's a lot of third-party tools already out there that you can buy on the market that are not really open source, but that can use to tune your car, increase performance, and stuff like that. People do racing. I've been doing that for quite a while now.
Wow. Yeah, so let's go out there and update our cars. So I have quite an old car because I don't drive around very much, so I, I
I don't know.
generally don't.
I cycle, so it's an entirely professional interest.
Yeah, I do drive around because we live in city in the Alps, so I need some. I do need to move around, but we have an old car because really just take the kids to school. There's nothing else going on here. Cool. Well, Olivier, it was a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for all the things we've gone through. We'll look at what Collabora does, what GStreamer is, and when we spoke about open source car software, which wasn't planned at all, but apparently it was interesting, and I'm I'm super curious about seeing more about it. So I'm gonna go research it. I'll probably going to try and get first switch in a car. I don't know why. I don't know, there's no point, but why not?
Well, you might want to do with calls. People do calls in car all the time. I don't know why no one ever tried to add a SIP service there.
Well, let's find out. I'll let you know in a couple of weeks. Cool. So again, Olivier Crête from Collabora, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Luca, for having us.
And for the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.